the pandemic on the way, and by the time we were finished listening to it, it took good time to test it on.
Kevin, are there any books left?
One.
Okay.
We could auction it.
Yeah. Okay, welcome to part two. And we have two men from England in Dún Laoghaire on a Saturday night. With Boff Whalley from Chumbawamba and much more. I can't even tell you how much I've gained from Boff's two books. I completely love both the autobiography, which is called Footnote, and then the new book, which is unlike any other book I've ever seen. It's got a yellow cover, which I highly recommend if anyone's putting out a book. Like it looks big from a distance, but I found it a very perplexing.
Best review I've ever had.
Yeah,
it
right.
looks big.
Yeah, it does.
Big and yellow.
Yeah, big and yellow, and it's there, and you're selling some copies, and we've John Robb, who first came with the membranes. My question, now this is going to sound strange. I want to take you back a little bit to the Industrial Revolution. And I'm not saying you're there.
Go further back.
Yeah. But, you know, when I'm teaching my students about popular culture, the big breach comes historically with the Industrial Revolution, where people are no longer tied like serfs to the land, and holidays become available to working class people. So, do you have any memories of early holidays when you were growing up? Like,
Well, yeah, for me it was like being on a holiday all the time. I grew in Blackpool, so you couldn't get more of an Industrial Revolution holiday town than Blackpool, could you? So going on holiday, we used to go on holiday to Benidorm, which is quite weird. It was like going to a Spanish version of Blackpool the sunshine, and you would meet people from school on the beach. So it's just like utterly pointless. You may as well stayed at home. Yeah. But you were from Burnley, which is like the opposite of a holiday town, isn't it?
Yeah, we were like 25 miles away from Blackpool, something like that. We used to go to Blackpool every year anyway for our. What used to happen is that all the industrial towns in the north, in order for, in terms of like the production and the mills and the factories, the entire town would all have the holiday at the same time, so all the factories would shut down. So and in Blackpool it would be like, oh, it's Glasgow week, it's Burnley week, it's Blackburn week, and you'd literally go there and everyone from Burnley would all be on the sands at Blackpool.
There was 2 Glasgow weeks, and they were completely crazy, because Burnley would come and it'd be a bit rough when Burnley was there. But when Glasgow came, it was mental, and it was like, I mean, I know I was 16 and some from Glasgow pulled a knife on me. This is a Glasgow holiday, so we thought, wow, everyone from Glasgow's a psychopath. So the first time I went to Glasgow to play a gig there, we're thinking, who's going to get out of the van first? Because you go, and it's the friendliest city in the world, isn't it? It's only when they went to Blackpool that it got a bit mad. Yeah, but they had 2 weekends, and everyone's mums and dads wouldn't let them out. And because when you're a punk, of course, because punk hadn't quite got there to Glasgow, so you look like a little freak walking down the prom with all these big dudes. I mean, they're really old, 25, 26, some of them about 14 or 15. Yeah.
Scary. Okay, well,
That's scary. See, no one in punk was that hard, were they? It's another myth, and everyone thinks like punks are all these big, cruel psychopaths, hard, tough guys, whatever. But it's just like a load of scared, naive kids, wasn't it? Standing in bus shelters, like, with homemade clothes on. That's what I wrote my memoirs. It's coming up. It's like that. That's how basically how rubbish we all were at being punk.
Yeah, the best punks were rubbish at being punk. Boff, and this is again, as probably, if it's uncomfortable, you don't have to answer it, but what were your perceptions of Ireland, growing up? Like, what were you hearing about Ireland?
Growing up, I probably didn't really know absolutely anything whatsoever about Ireland until the early 80s.
Right.
And then it started, when I started kind of properly getting interested in politics and everything. And basically what we knew was that Margaret Thatcher was waging basically upholding a kind of colonial rule over Ireland, and so it was like, okay, yeah, I understand which side I've got to be on now. To us, the whole thing of the hunger strikes. That suddenly became a big thing because everything was everything in the press and everything was telling us that Irish people are murdering bombers, and then suddenly there was this other side of it, which was the whole Bobby Sands being a poet and all that sort of thing. And I remember getting Christy Moore's Spirit of Freedom album, which you couldn't buy in the shops in England. You bought it at like marches and demos and stuff like that. And I had all these beautiful songs on about all the hunger strikers. And I remember when we moved into the big squat we lived in Leeds, we squatted in 1982, and probably 1983. Whenever there was an election, we got the thing saying fill in for your voting cards, and we went by the old Republican thing, which was vote early, vote often. We just filled out 10 hunger strikers as living there, and got 10 voting cards for the hunger strikers, and went and voted with them.
Beat that, John.
Well, we were actually on holiday in Ireland in 1969 in Dun Laoghaire. We went there for some reason, and when it started the whole thing, so I remember when my dad took me, we were young then, I was only about 7 I think, so you didn't really know what they were talking about. And then it seemed like this kind of scary place. I mean, obviously Belfast, Northern Ireland. And then we went to play Belfast in 1980. First gig we played outside the UK. So we're only kids then. The drummer was 16 and I was about 19. Because our manager was not a writer for the Daily Express. He was a school teacher and he had no idea what he's doing, but he's from Belfast. So he used to go and Terry Hooley's shops. He knew Terry and he got Terry to get us a gig there. So we played outside the Mayfield, is it Mayfield or Maysfield Leisure Centre in Belfast. So we went there and we were a bit nervous because our impression of Belfast was it's like a war zone, and we got there and it did look like a bit like a war zone. So that was the days when the city centre had these big fences around it and you got a search going in to the centre. And I remember staying in Bob, who's our manager's mum's house, and there's people in the garden, machine guns, the army. And we go, wow, what's this? They were so desensitised to it. People go, what are you going on about? It's just people in the garden. And we go, I've not seen people in the garden in Blackpool with guns before, And everywhere you went, these like little trucks, people with machine guns out the backs. Then we went back 6 years later, actually, when Niall put us on. We toured Ireland, and I remember probably the second tour we did, and we went up to play in Derry, and no one ever played Derry, did they? Yeah. We got all the way there. And the gig had been cancelled because the promoter had forgotten he's putting us on. We go, wow, we actually made all the effort to come all the way here. And then on the way back, at about midnight, we got stopped by these British soldiers on the border getting back into this bit of Ireland. And they were really shitting it, really nervous. And they had the guns, and you could see his guns shaking like that. And he was asking for our names, but he couldn't spell my name right. Like, I've only got 8 letters in my name. And most people can't spell it right, actually. So I said, it's 2 B's. And he's going, shut up! I said, it's 2 B's. And I said, well, you want to get my name written down, right, to go right down. And write down the pencil. It was so amateurish, the whole thing. This went off for half an hour. And they were searching in the van and all that. I was thinking, wow, imagine having to put up with that every day, This is the middle of nowhere, so we had no idea how this could end up. And there's nothing worse than a nervous person with a gun, is there? Yeah.
And did you meet any other people with guns when you came down to this part of Ireland?
Yes, we did actually, because I forgot about this. Because the first time we played, we stayed in a squat in Dublin, didn't we? And it was next door to a bank. So we're staying there, and it's about 7 in the morning. There's a banging on the door. So I get up, I go up the stairs. I've only got my undies on. I open the door, and I thought, who the fuck's banging on the door? And it's about like 10 cops with machine guns standing there, and it's a bit of a shock in the morning, isn't it, that, and I'm not dressed in the right kind of way for that kind of thing, and they thought we were bank robbers, that we were trying to drill through the wall to get to the vaults of the bank to steal all the money. And that was is it Brian, the guy? Is your mate? Yeah. Who I actually met about 20 years later, and it's his squat, wasn't it? So so that was some other more mad people, nervous people with guns, wasn't it?
Never good, wherever you are. And Boff, when was the first time you performed in Ireland? When, was it difficult to get a gig in Ireland? Was it on your radar even?
I can't remember. What I remember is that we had the kind of not an argument, but we had dialogue with the people from Warzone, which I thought was great, because I just thought we're coming at this from a completely different perspective, and maybe we'll kind of learn something from this. And it's interesting to have that. And I always liked it where if Chumbers did something that broke out of the punk rock rules, I always thought it was really important to keep trying to break the punk rock rules, almost in a kind of bloody-minded way. Not because we thought, oh, that's, we totally believe this, but sometimes you just think, so like for instance when we signed to EMI or with the Warzone thing, we knew that people would come up at gigs and go, right, okay, I want a really fucking big argument about this. And I thought that was great, I loved that. Rather than, we're just doing and singing exactly what we're meant to do, and the audience just like it. And I liked, we did a couple of albums, and then the third album we sat down and said, what should we do next? Let's do an a cappella album that's got it's completely different. And we went, but we're going to lose all our audience. We're like, that'd be interesting. And we always loved that kind of thing. And I think with the Irish stuff, I mean, we didn't really know what was going on. We were really misguided. I'd been to Ireland twice with the Troops Out movement, just like staying with families in Belfast, and trying to learn about what was kind of going on. But again, I think that whole dialogue was really interesting. Yeah, it was good.
And punk rock, like, Boff, where did punk rock enter your life, your world?
Well, one of the I was thinking this earlier when we were talking about something else, but I was saying, because we're both from like northern industrial, kind of towns, it always really irked me that there's a narrative, especially quite a few years after punk, there's a narrative that punk only lasted about a year, and it was all around, King's Road, Pistols, that whole thing. And if you read, some of the, John Savage's stuff, he will tell, he'll basically say it died, in about 1977, 78. But that was exactly the time when it was just getting going in the northern industrial towns and in Scotland. And what happened was that we didn't have that safety net, that structure, that scaffolding of the media and the centre of, where it was all happening, where you bought the clothes and you bought the records. We had to work really hard to be punks. We didn't have record shops that, we had to travel to Manchester to go to a record shop to get punk records. We made our own clothes, that's what we did. And then we learned how to make fanzines, and we learned how to put gigs on and get venues, and it was fantastic, a really fantastic time. In terms of do-it-yourself, it was like, look, we're teenagers, we don't know what we're doing. We went and found some people from the kind of counterculture, people who'd been hippies, who had suddenly we found out that people had cooperative housing, and they had whole food co-ops, and they had photocopiers where they could put, we were like, let's get in on this. And that was just all a big education for us. It was great. So that whole kind of, the narrative of punk dying really quick, I just think, that's when it was really, really important to a lot of people in small towns all over the country.
And John, for you, punk, where did it enter your world?
Well, I'm older than you, obviously, I think. I'm 65 now. What are you now?
Yeah, 65.
Oh, yeah. You talk like you're younger than me. He looks good on it, doesn't he? So I was like a glam rock kid originally, so I love glam rock, but I'm not one of those people, Bowie's Starman changed my life, because I didn't realise Bowie was cooler than everyone else. I love David Bowie, but I didn't know he was any cooler than Mud or Sweet. I just thought it's all ace, Slade, Sparks, all that stuff, Top of the Pops, every week, watching all that, total genius. But for us in Blackpool, for me, it could have come from London or outer space. It's the same thing. It's somewhere you never went to. We went to London once. We went to London to go to the Jimmy Savile show on a school trip. But Olivia Newton-John was singing the songs for Europe from 1974, the one that ABBA won with Waterloo, which is a great song actually, isn't it? So that was my experience of pop, and I was obsessed with pop music, but I didn't know anybody could play musical instruments, because again, that's what people from London or outer space did. I mean, even though Blackpool's a showbiz town, it still felt detached from show business itself. It wasn't something you could do yourself. So punk comes along, so I started reading about the music papers. In fact, to see the pictures first, I think, this looks like it sounds really good, you know, because you had to imagine it all in your head, because you couldn't hear it. It's not like you could Google it or anything. And then I was at ice skates, the only place you could hang out when you were 15 in Blackpool, so with this skating rink, and they played punk records. They played the Pistols and they played the Ramones, and it's like, wow, this sounds like glam rock again. So it sounded ace, sounded brilliant. It's all right, I'm a punk, I have no idea what it is, but I am, that's what I'm going to do now. And just like what Boff was saying, you couldn't get the stuff, you know. It's not like you go to the Blackpool punk shop and get your punk clothes. The London experience is completely different. So in my book, I'm going to give a plug, the memoirs, but it's not really about me, it's about that generation of people in small towns growing up with punk, because our experience is different. It wasn't a struggle, it was actually, as you were saying, it was actually really good fun, trying to put it all together in a really naive kind of way. We completely believed in the whole thing. We believed that they were saying, anybody can do this, go and do it. So we thought, fucking hell, yeah, let's go and do it. Let's have a band. So we did it. I thought, I had a band. I was the only person in it at first, because you're just making this all up as you go along. And I made my mate down the road be the guitar player, Mark Tilton, whose brother's Ian Tilton, the photographer. So you could be the guitar player because you seem quite arty. Then we bought a guitar and a bass, but we didn't know you meant to tune them up. So we put the machine heads in a row to make them tidy, and we played the first 10 gigs like that, utterly out of tune. I remember after the first gig, they were almost in tears how shit it was, the gig. And I was going, wow, that was amazing, wasn't it? You know, let's do it again. I was so enthusiastic and made the band carry on. And do you know what? I think that's probably the best gig we ever played. It's the purest distillation of the punk spirit. Because even though we were like terrified, nervous teenagers on a Saturday afternoon in a Northern Soul club playing a punk gig, totally out of tune, it was pure as fuck, you know. And basically I spent the last 50 years doing that, really. Because when I wrote the book, I just realised I don't really have any musical talent at all. I just did it anyway, which is, to me, is what punk rock is, isn't it? Because it was about daring to do something, and that sense of empowerment, whether it's music, culture, politics, anything. You can change the world by believing you can change the world. You know, a good idea is more important than anything, isn't it? And I think, I believe in that, and I learned that from punk rock, and I think the revolution of punk rock ultimately was that. But I'm not taking anything away from those first wave bands. Without the Pistols, none of this would happen. And I hate the rewrites of punk history, you know, where people say the Pistols, you know, you see on Facebook pages now, like, the Pistols were just a boy band, they weren't real, it's all fake, blah, blah, blah. No, they changed your life, you know, it was a powerful thing. Even though we just talked about this before, you had no idea, it's so contradictory. Yeah. And they was talking in so many opposite things at the same time that we didn't really understand what they were then, and we don't understand what they were now. They were anti-rock and roll, but also one of the greatest rock and roll bands that's ever been produced in this country. They looked amazing. In fact, in the end, you wouldn't even have to listen to a note. You just have to look at John Lydon's face in 76, 77, and that changed your life. And I know it's difficult talking about now because he's a very different character now. But at that point in time, for 5 years, he was the best, wasn't he? And it was a game changer, wasn't it? You didn't want to be him, or you didn't want to be in the Sex Pistols, but the energy that was coming off them was really inspirational, but confusing, because you didn't know what to do. So like you were saying, when you're saying you're making your own clothes, you probably same as me, going to Oxfam and taking in trousers, 1-inch stitches, wasn't it? You know, trying to make them drain pipes. You couldn't get drain pipes. You had to cut your own hair. Barbers wouldn't cut your hair in the punk style. Like, you had to pierce your own ears, you know, with a compass, you know. That was DIY. Everything was DIY. I've got that ear wrong. That ear's vertical, so I can't. To this day, it's never healed up. So I had to put. I don't know why I did 2, because it could have slipped, couldn't I? Yeah. So that's what it was for people of my vintage. It was pop culture, but made up naively on your own terms. You know, you weren't trying to be crap, but but at least you were doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when 1976, the Sex Pistols' first appearance on British TV was on Granada, on Tony Wilson's programme. I used to watch Tony Wilson's programme. Because like John, I was really into music, loved music. And there'd be all these bands like Sad Cafe and, you know, and just shit. Yeah. But every so often they had something good on. They'd have like Iggy Pop, I'd never heard of it. Well, I'd heard of him, but I had no idea what it was like. And I was like, whoa. But then when he put the Sex Pistols on, I'd already been reading about them in the NME. And I was in the living room. I was brought up in a strict Mormon family. So we didn't, you know, there was no kind of blasphemy, no alcohol, none of that. It was all very religious. But I was into music, so I was sitting there, and Tony Wilson says, you know, here we've got this band who seem to be creating a bit of a stir. First time on telly, Sex Pistols, and Johnny Rotten comes on, and the first thing he does, he gets the mic. Bear in mind, he's probably like about 20 years old at this point. He's never been on telly before. He gets the mic and he looks into the camera and he goes, "Get off your arse."
You know why? Do you know why he said that though? Because I always thought he was looking down the camera telling us to get off our arses.
Yeah.
But apparently the audience is about 20 people in the audience.
Yeah, they're all
just
sitting
sat on the floor, and he's basically saying to them, "Get off your arses." But it's an amazing scene. It's a Pistols, best Pistols appearance, isn't
It's
it?
fantastic.
He's got a pink jacket on. He looks amazing. Jordan's there with the whip.
Yeah.
And the whole thing looks, it looks completely weird. It's like the Velvet Underground, but psychotic, isn't it?
And Matlock's got Karl Marx.
Yeah, the classic shirt.
Yeah. And everything about him was like, I've never seen anything like this. And I didn't know whether I liked it or not. I just remember going to school the day after and I was all going, "Did you see Sex Pistols on telly?" And suddenly you started going, they're on my side, they're on my side.
But a quick aside to that is that, you know, even though we were on the outside, we weren't in London or whatever, we're both in Lancashire, that we actually had, so it goes, Tony Wilson was putting this stuff on our local telly. It wasn't in the rest of the country. We saw the Sex Pistols, and we probably saw the Pistols before most people in London have seen them. Because they filmed that in August '76. They hadn't played that many shows in London, and they were only playing to 50 people at a time. And they're on telly in the northwest of England, and it's like, suddenly they're playing to, I don't know how many people watch So It Goes, probably 100,000 or whatever, but it's a lot of people all of a sudden. So we had a weird cultural head start. So often when people say, how come Manchester have this quite advanced music scene, blah, 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 I'm thinking, it is So It Goes, isn't it? Because because nowadays with the internet, because you can look at anything on YouTube and you see everything, and it's great, I love instant culture, but we actually get to see that stuff before most people in the country's seen it, and that's powerful, isn't it?
It's really powerful. And, you know, our history books talked about Britain in a particular way, as you can imagine, and that the priests saved us from you. They rescued us from Britain. And
well, the Pope's doing a good job against Trump now, so viva the Pope. He's the only person who stands up to Donald Trump in the world. And that thing he said last week, he's not scared of Donald Trump. I thought, that's pretty good, that, isn't it? It's not going to make me a believer, but good on you, mate.
And for years, people in Dún Laoghaire on a Saturday night have been saying "Viva the Pope." So it's great to hear the tradition carries on. But you know, we were taught that Britain was a blob. We weren't taught that there were, you know, different parts of the country that had different feelings. So it's fascinating to hear that north-south divide. So had you been in Ireland before you were in London when you were growing up?
Yeah, I had in 1969 we were in Ireland for holidays,
So London was detached and remote from where you were. It did feel like that other planet.
Apart from that school trip to the Jimmy Savile show, nobody ever went to London. It's really hard to get to. It's a long way away, you know. It just seemed like it could have been New York. I mean, would you ever go to London in the 70s?
Well, the first time I went, we went on a school trip to see an Ellis Lowry an art exhibition. I can't remember how old I was, but I remember meeting my mate Sage, who started playing guitar with a band. They were called Not Sensibles, and they just started, and we just said, let's go and find the Rough Trade shop. And so we left and we went and found Rough Trade. We just kind of sneaked off, and all I could afford was 2 copies of Sniffing Glue, and they kind of changed my life. It was just like, I've never seen anything like this.
Somebody brought us a copy of Sniffing Glue to school, actually, and that's how we started doing the fanzine. We thought, wow, anyone could do it. Although you can't, but you look at it and go, wow, they've hand-drawn this, and it's a really broken typewriter. I've got a broken typewriter. Maybe we could do a fanzine. So that's how we did a fanzine. And what we hadn't realised is that Mark Tilton's dad was a printer, not a full-on printer, just a work printer. He said, well, you could just Xerox those. I go, what does that mean? And he made 50. But he also made 50. We did a thing taking the piss out of the school, and we gave them out around the school. And they said, I thought, you think we were naive? The teachers thought there was an anarchist cell in the school. And they go, you did that thing, they called a special assembly in the afternoon, and we go, we know who's done this. So all you have to do is admit you've done it, and we'll let you off. We go, that ain't going to happen. But when I got kicked out of school, about a week before the end of school, I went into the office and they said, right, you're not coming back. And the file had a copy of this thing in it, so he worked out it was me. But it wouldn't be hard to work it out. There was 2 punks and 1 hippie in the school, so it's obviously us, wasn't it? But the word Xerox, even though it goes back to 1920, it's still one of my favourite. It looks like a punk word. It's got 2 X's in it, and that idea of fast communication, you know, that way you could print instead of like waiting for the newspaper to come out once a week, you could photocopy your own ideas and learn to be a writer. That's how I learned to be. Well, when I say learn to be a writer, that's how I was a writer then. You know, it wasn't like now you go on a course to be a music journalist and then you just start typing stuff and photocopying it. And that was punk rock again, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's really important. And you know, it's something that came from Kevin's. It's from the fanzine people here as well. Boff, there's a line in your book that stays with me, and it's
the end.
Yeah. Okay, it's that kind of night. Yeah, John didn't bring many books because his book isn't out, and we didn't organise for his books to be here. So, you know, Ryanair, it's cheap, but it's not free. So for John to get back to England, he doesn't have any books to sell, but he will be doing piercings upstairs.
Bring your own compass.
Yeah.
A piece of cork. Wait, what the line? I want to know what the line is now.
I'm not telling you.
Oh, I won't listen.
Boff, there's a line in your book about it was a life very well lived, and thankfully for us, it was also very well recorded. And both of you are writers, you know, you're people who, whatever way life, you know, guided you, you've made a substantial part of your living from writing books that people like us get to read. And that was in the context of someone I'd never heard about, who was the sister of a poet who I had heard about.
Yeah.
So before you speak about that, can you both tell me about your writing processes? Like, how do you write a book? Like, how does that work for you? What's your routine?
I'll go.
Yeah, you go.
Never write the first line first. Yeah, because you sat there. It's like anything like music as well. You know, you pick up a guitar, and it's you have to get in the groove. You know, same with writing as well. So you sit there, blank sheet of paper. I love a blank sheet of paper. You can go anywhere if you're drawing, writing, music, whatever. It's the best place in the world. There's no panic. But don't think it's going to come out good straight away. So you start in the middle, and then you get the flow. When you get the flow, you go back and do the beginning, and then don't stop. I mean, you just once you're in the flow, once you're in the zone, you could be there for hours. And you know what? It's the best thing in the world. It's the luckiest thing in the world to be able to sit there, just writing, making music, whatever, and it's all pouring out. And I love that feeling. I don't care about all the other stuff. I don't care if anybody else is interested in it. I don't care if I ever get paid for it. That buzz of the stuff pouring out is mind blowing. You know, literally mind blowing. And that's how you write. Yeah, do you get it?
Yeah. Lovely. Boff, for you.
Yeah, to me it's about again, obviously I didn't write before punk came along.
Okay.
And what I realised was that it was really literate, and that I was suddenly, you know, the Buzzcocks' first single, Howard Devoto's lyrics, they're incredible. And at the same time I was getting into the Liverpool poets, you know, McGough, Adrian Henry, Brian Patton, and I started thinking, okay, there's a connection here, and it's not like the kind of rock and roll stuff that I'd been listening to. It was really clever stuff. And I thought, I want to do that. If I'm writing lyrics, I want them to have some kind of substance to them.
I love that line on Spiral Scratch. Sticky pictures of the Queen, and Pete Shelley sings "Stick Up."
Yeah,
it's so fantastic, isn't it? Yeah. It just basically sums up the early Buzzcocks perfectly, doesn't it?
There's one of the Howard Devoto lines on Orgasm Addict where he sings, I've even made it with the lady who puts the little plastic robins on the Christmas cakes. What a lyric, that is brilliant.
All of human life is in there.
Buzzcocks are so important, aren't they? I mean, they often do the story Manchester music, and it's overtold, but it's great. It's great to celebrate the city. But often the Buzzcocks get missed out of it. So you kind of start to Joy Division. And you think, without Buzzcocks, this thing will not start. The first independent single, I think somebody mentioned that before, was Buzzcocks, Spiral Scratch. Third punk single, wasn't it? January 7th, 77. Out It Comes, sounding rough, but brilliant, amazing record. They put the Pistols on in Manchester, the Catalytic gig. They had a record label called New Hormones, Inspired Factory. It all starts at Buzzcocks, you know, which often gets overlooked. Apart from the fact that they're still one of the greatest bands, first 3 albums, every song's a killer, isn't it? Yeah.
Incredible. Was there loyalty to some of the northern bands up in the, like, was the scene regional? You weren't travelling to London a lot. Like, did you support your local bands?
The M62 corridor. That's what Andrew Eldritch always calls it.
The M62 corridor. I mean,
M62 sounds.
For me, Manchester was okay. You had the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned and stuff in London, but in Manchester it felt like this. You know, I remember going to Manchester really early on and seeing people like just walking around, seeing John Cooper Clarke just in a record shop and saying, "Hi John," and he's like, "How are you doing?" And just thinking, yeah, this is the place that I love, and these people are walking. They're not some big superstar. It's not, you know, I'm never going to meet David Bowie, but I could meet Pete Shelley, you know, walking along the road eating a burger on Dingsgate in Manchester, you know. And
there was also in a sense, all the bands don't sound exactly the same, but there's a similar, you know, like punk records don't always sound like punk records. We talked about this before, like Metal Box. It's ostensibly not a punk record at all, but it feels like a punk record. I think the same northern bands, so even though each city had its own discernible kind of version of punk, there's a feel on it that feels northern. I think that's more than it's a deliberate process of all the bands know each other, some kind of northern trade union. They have a similar kind of vibe, which they can't help. Yeah. I mean, Shirley Collins, a folk singer, you know, who's about 87 now, she's amazing. And I've interviewed Shirley, and she talks about how folk music her folk music she loves, which is the folk music of South Sussex, specifically that area. She likes all the old songs from the 14th century. She's an expert on it. It comes from the soil of England. I love that idea. It comes like music from Ireland comes from the soil of Ireland. So whatever sound you're trying to do, you can't help it coming out through the filter of where you're from. Basically, the people you grew with, the very vibe, the very ley lines that you're on. You know, it's the energy that's here will affect you in a way you don't even know. So if there's a band in Dublin that's trying to sound like an American band, it will still sound like some kind of hybrid, won't it? And that's in the north. I think the bands couldn't help sound like the way they're going to sound like, but they were different in each city, weren't they? You know, Manchester was that kind of dressed down.
Talking about like Shirley Collins and folk music is that with Cecil Sharp, who was like the big English, you know, folk song collector. He knew that Ireland and Scotland had fantastic, you know, legacy of a history of folk that was traditionally carried on. Yeah. England didn't have that; it kind of disappeared. So he wanted to kind of manufacture it. So what he did is he went around collecting all the songs, and the problem is that when he came up north, he wouldn't collect. They were collecting folk dancers as well. He wouldn't collect club dancers, and he wouldn't collect industrial songs because he thought they were uncouth. So the factory workers' songs from like Lancashire and Yorkshire, he wouldn't collect those. That's why folk music in England is full of "I walked out one May morning, hey nonny no." You know, those songs are great, but
there's no shagging songs. because they were like probably 80% of folk songs, like pop music, was about fucking, wasn't it? But they were
a lot of the songs that came back from the First World War, lots of bawdy, you know, folk, you know, soldiers' songs, they all got cleaned up. So you know, like Bless 'em all, bless 'em all, bless 'em all was originally Fuck 'em all. It was about the officers. So they cleaned it up and made it a nice. Yeah, and that's kind of the history of a lot of the northern industrial towns, is that they let's write them out of it because it's a bit sooty and ugly.
Which is what, again, we go back to the beginning, is what punk was, wasn't it? It's a moment in time when these songs, when Bless 'em all became Fuck 'em all again, didn't it? Yeah, because punk was an electric folk music of the late 70s, wasn't it? You know, it's not folk music as we think of folk music, but it's a folk music, isn't it? It's people's music made by people for other people, isn't it? Ostensibly. I mean, these are broad brushstrokes, aren't they? But that's what it kind of was, and as the years go by, that's how you see it, isn't it? You know, as a period.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, punk is incredibly complex. It doesn't fit in a box. Some people are put in a box.
It's indefinable, though. I think, you know, when people say people say, oh, yeah, punk is this. I think they're out of the equation already. Because when people say to me, how do you define punk? So, well, I don't define punk. It's different to me every single day. And you don't think about it every day, of course. But everybody's got their own version of it. If you think punk is just drinking 4 bottles of cider and lying in the gutter, that's fine. Yeah. That's your version of it, isn't it? For some other people's version, like I say with the Chumbers, it was a chance to actually get in the mainstream and cause some trouble, you know. And they pulled that off, which is quite amazing. And so everybody went off on these kind of completely different journeys with the same piece of energy, and that's what makes it fascinating. But to say it's one thing is a complete fallacy, isn't it?
Back to singing. You're in a very religious upbringing at home, where profanity is not tolerated. But then there's a lovely tender moment in the more recent book where you talk about when your family all got together in upstairs rooms at functions.
Yeah.
Singing.
Yeah.
Was incredibly important.
Yeah, and that was separate from the church. That was before the Mormon missionaries knocked on the door when I was 6 or 7, and she went for it, and that was it. We were stuck in that church then. But before that, my real kind of family we all met in the pub, and every Saturday night me and my sister would sit there with, you know, Coke and a straw and a bag of crisps or whatever. But every week it would, like, my Uncle Harry, who was like 6'4", people would say, come on Harry, give us a song, and he'd stand up at the end of the night and start singing, and everybody in the pub started singing. Now obviously people in Ireland, that's a lot more normal.
Yeah.
And it was then, back then in Lancashire, people would all just sing in the pubs before jukeboxes and before tellies and all that sort of stuff. And it's gone now, and that's a real pity, because it was just this beautiful communal thing. And it was only later that I looked back on it and thought, I know all these old songs from everybody singing them in the pub, and what a lovely thing that was. How great. And now instead what we do is we all just sit and watch the telly, watch the football in the pub. Well, you can go to the match, can't you? People sing, which I think football crowds. McCarthy says it's the last true expression of English folk music. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and it's a giant choir. I always think that music is a place of harmony in a world of chaos. You know, that's the beauty of music, isn't it? And even like something that's really discordant, like we often were, it's got has its own sort of warped logic version of harmony to it. It's people attempting to find a harmony in a world of chaos, and that's, to me, that's the beauty of music, isn't it? That's what joins it all together, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a Membranes performance that to me was very memorable, because it was, what's he doing now? And it was
that's what I'm thinking.
And it was that Rebellion where you introduced a whole choir. Came and joined you. So this idea of communal singing is something that both of you have visited. Tell me more about that how did that fit into the world of the Membranes, and how did it happen?
Well, we don't have a specific sound, so we do what we like. So I think all the best creativity's on a whim, innit? So if you get really into something, you just do it. Whether you have any, just like being in a band in the first place. I had no idea how to be in a band, but we just did it. So taking that to its nth degree. So I was in Estonia, this music event, and Estonia's got choirs. Every woman in Estonia's in a choir, because in the Soviet occupation they weren't allowed to speak Estonian. So the only place they could still speak Estonian was singing it in choirs. So there's suddenly being in a choir became incredibly popular, and all the choir things are written for women, virtually nearly all. There's some guys in choirs. So I saw this choir, and it's absolutely amazing. It's really beautiful music. So you know April.Part, he does some stuff as well, choral stuff. So I'm sat there. I actually went with Viv Albertine, which is quite weird, isn't it? Because I'd just done an in-conversation with her. So I went up to the choir, the woman conducting the choir at the end, and said, we have to do a gig together. And she goes, okay, let's do it. So it's like that. So my bluff was called. So then I had to go back a month later and sing to a choir all the parts I wanted them to do. And I'm not a singer, so I'm kind of going, I want it to go like, whoa, 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 like that. And they start singing, and I go, wow, that does sound good now. And then we did a gig in Estonia, and it went really well. So I thought, I'll do this in the UK, but I can't fly a choir in from Estonia because I've got no money. So I just got this woman who worked in college to put a choir together out of the students. That was our choir. And every time we did a gig, it was a different choir. It was quite, you think they're going to forget all this stuff, aren't they? You have got one rehearsal. But we did it, we thought, let's go do Rebellion, the least likely place to have a choir of 20 people sing along. But people really liked it, you know. You know, so that was interesting as well. How far you could push it. You know, what you do in music, because like what you were saying, punk, it could be anything, can't it? You know, if they want to do a record that's a core record, and you want to do a folk record, whatever. It's the feel of the record's more important than the actual music of it, isn't it? And also, I was thinking that before in the last interview, which was really great actually, the SLF one. Yeah. That idea that people saw that in Belfast saw them as being fake or not real. I don't get that at all, because a lot of punk was bands created their own narrative. They made it up. I mean, the Clash weren't our age. We actually thought we'll get a band going and get clothes like the Clash can get, but the Clash has someone on the road making their clothes for them every night. But I think that's ace. They were showbiz, you know, but the best showbiz ever. Joe Strummer was 27 and he'd been to a posh school, but that didn't spoil it for me, because they transcended it all by being completely brilliant. Same with SLF. I don't care who wrote the lyrics of Suspect Device. When Jake Burns sings those lyrics, they feel like they mean everything, don't they? And I think in the end, this idea of what real is and what a real band should be and what's fake, it's a completely stupid argument, isn't it? It's what it sounds like. If you're in the room, it's good. And who cares how it came, where it came from? I don't find that important. It's the emotional reaction to that sound in that moment that matters to me.
I don't know what to say.
I kind of disagree with some of that.
Good.
Yeah. Just because I can't. I'm one of these people. I can't just listen to music and how it emotionally or physically or viscerally affects me. That's great, whatever. I want to know the context.
I know the context, but I don't think it has to be one context.
But sometimes, sometimes the story makes me like something, and sometimes the story. So, like for instance, however much I used to like the Smiths, I find it really difficult to listen to Morrissey singing now. I just think if he comes on, I just think, no, fuck off. And
well, I think with him, I'll take any opportunity to disagree what he says these days.
Yeah. But
I still like the sound his voice makes when he's singing.
I just think, Johnny's guitar, it's so good. Yeah. Why is that bloke saying this shit? No, it's just, and I love context. I remember, was it Elvis Costello? I remember years and years ago saying, he was talking about shipbuilding, and he was saying, well, you know, you have to interpret it yourself and find out what it's about. But until somebody's told me that shipbuilding was about the Falklands War, I just thought, that's a really lovely song, that's lovely. When I found out it was about the Falklands War, I was like, this is like one of the best songs I've ever heard. Because it's so beautiful, and the way it talks about it, I didn't realise what it was about.
Well, that adds to it, yeah. But also I find often some of the greatest art's made by the most awful people, isn't it? So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
And also some of the most boring art is made by some of the nicest people.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm not big. Coldplay not made for me. But Chris Martin seems like the nicest guy in the world. But I can't really listen to his music. And I'm not saying that's a cheap shot, because he's obviously a talented songwriter, and I don't listen to that kind of music.
Bit of a cheap shot.
Well, no, honestly, I'm trying to explain.
You knew you were crying with you on that.
No, that's why I was trying to explain it wasn't a cheap shot. Because I actually think he's a really decent guy, you know, and he stands for really good, decent stuff, and he actually does probably make more change in a pop cultural context than all our punk heroes ever did, you know, like politically and stuff like that. But I can't really listen to his records, you know, so I don't think being the character of a person, obviously if it's a person you think that goes through your checklist of the sort of person you like, and they make music you like as well, that makes life easier, but it isn't the whole story, is it? I think humans are complex, aren't they? They're contradictory, complex creatures who make contradictory, complex music. Yeah.
And to me, that's a brilliant point to make tonight, is that there's a huge complexity, there's a huge contradiction in punk. And the other thing that's coming from what both of you are saying is that, you know, punk has music, take it or leave it. You know, for me, there was nothing better in my life, and it came at the right time in my life. But the stories around punk, if you wanted to study narrative, no one did it better than punk. You know, with the stories, with the myths, with the perceptions. So, just back to that idea of communal singing, and bizarrely, I was reading an interview with Coldplay this afternoon in a magazine I found, and they were talking about their favourite music, and one of them I don't know any of their names except the main guy who was married to a famous woman. But one of the other guys was asked about pivotal moments, and he said it was Christy Moore. And that Christy Moore, it was the first gig that he ever went to, it was with his mother, and he rates no artist higher. And I thought, I didn't know that. You know, you never know what someone's been inspired by. So you do an a cappella album that's as on punk as you can be, which makes it as punk as you possibly can be, but it fits brilliantly into the story of punk being anything you want it to be, but it also fits into 400 years of British song being sung just for the joy of it. So can you tell us a little bit about that album and that process and why you went for it?
Yeah, because like I was saying earlier, we were aware that Ireland and Scotland and Wales, even to a certain extent, had their own traditional folk singing musical history, and England didn't really. And so we thought, let's find all the English radical songs that we can kind of find, going back centuries, and and let's try and sing them. And we couldn't find recordings of them, most of them, so we just got books out of the library. Could barely read music, but we worked out the melodies and then worked out harmonies with them and sang these English rebel songs from the 1300s, 1381 or whatever is the first one. And again, we thought the beautiful thing about that was because we knew it was, like you said, to us it was like the most punk rock thing that we could have done. What happened is that we sent that record. We used to get our records reviewed by Maximum Rock and Roll, and we anyway, used to love that magazine in America. They refused to review it because they said it wasn't punk, and which we thought was great. And in the issue that came out where they could have reviewed it, what happened is that we had a friend who wrote for Maximum Rock and Roll, and he said, "I'll put it in my scene report. I'll just do a little review, sneak it in," which he did. But at the same time, there were reviews, proper reviews, in the review section of this, I think, a Brazilian far right, like Nazi punk band. And we were like, yeah, so that's punk, but if you sing it a cappella, then it's not punk. We loved that. We just thought, this is brilliant. It's a great story, isn't it?
They were so earnest, weren't they?
Yeah.
Maximum Rock and Roll. I mean, it's great. There was a worldwide punk distribution information network.
It was amazing.
But it's also, it kind of made punk very linear, and the earnestness of it was like not how punk started. Because I like the contradictory nature of punk. I like the way it doesn't fit into a box, and it was uncomfortable as well. You could tell the Pistols, some of the stuff they were saying or doing was not stuff you would personally agree with. Quite a lot of it actually. But it was a Pandora's box of ideas. Some were great, some were rubbish. I always think punk was just loads of question marks, and it's up to you to find the answers for yourself, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a thing where I'm just thinking in terms of Pandora's box. One of the things that punk brought along was women musicians, and women as part of the scene, and women who were making things and doing things. And so for me, actually watching the Slits and the Raincoats and the Au Pairs and seeing them live, thinking this kind of blows my little Lancashire tiny mind. To me, all music was men, with the occasional woman kind of singing lead somewhere. And suddenly, loads of bands, they were all women. And it was like, right, okay, grow up, Boff, this is fucking happening, you better get used to it. Same with, being homophobic, being racist. I was like, shit, all the cool band, the Clash, they like reggae music. I was, I brought up as a Mormon in a small Lancashire town. I was racist and homophobic, and I had to confront these things. I had this thing with Tom Robinson, when he brought out Glad to Be Gay. John Peel played it, and I remember hearing it on John Peel, because I used to listen to his programme religiously once I'd left the Mormon church, obviously. And I loved it. He played Tom Robinson, and I thought, nah, that's going too far. It's not for me. And seriously, I was totally out of order. And then I was at Burnley Tech College then. I went to college, and there were these two girls who were a year older than me, and they were punks. They were the only other two punks in the college, and I really looked up to them. And I went in, and one of them, this lass called Linda, she said, "Oh, did you hear that new Tom Robinson thing that was on John Peel last night, Glad to Be Gay?" And I went, "Yeah." And she said, "It's fucking brilliant, isn't it?" And I went, yeah, it's great. And I walked away and I thought, yeah, I need to take a look at what I'm thinking, because the cool people, they're not homophobic. What am I doing? I'm clinging on to this shitty old idea. So that's what punk rock did. It was a Pandora's box of things being thrown at me. I was like, whoa, it's asking me to deal with this now. Oh, it's asking me to, and that was brilliant, fantastic. A lot of music didn't do that before and doesn't do it now.
It probably does actually. It wasn't just then. I think it's always someone somewhere asking questions, isn't there?
Yeah, but I mean, as a movement, it was just so weird and diverse, and
for us at that point in time, because it was a jump, wasn't it? But if you're a 16, 14, 12-year-old kid now, there's music getting made now, they'll be asking the same questions, I think. But it won't be as a movement or something. It's just a general idea of what slightly left of centre pop culture does.
Yeah. People will find inspiration. You know, everyone will. Every generation will. But that's really interesting. So there's two girls who are slightly older than you. They're the only other punks. John, where did you encounter women in that music scene?
Well, not so much in the scene, but the oldest punk in Blackpool was actually a woman, and the hardest punk in Blackpool. Yeah, she was hard.
You found to your cost.
No, I got on with her, but she was cool. She was amazing. Yeah. So there's a few. Yeah, there's more women in that scene than there will be in other scenes as well. And also, it won't be sexually charged. They'd just be your mates. You know, that was cool as well. You just hang out with them. You know, which in other sort of teenage scenes, you'd be like boys on one side room, girls on the other. The sort of men, you know, the rugby players will get the girls and everyone else will stand in the corner. That was normal world, wasn't it? Yeah. In punk world, it was just the same. People talk about the same records and clothes, and often sharing, swapping the clothes as well. Yeah. So you'd wear the girls' clothes and they'd wear the boys' clothes, because they weren't really. They were sexy, the clothes, but they weren't genderfied, were they? So that was good as well. But in Blackpool itself, there weren't that many women in bands, because again, it was the 70s. It was old, and even though there were these amazing women making music in punk, like Boff saying, like Slits and Raincoats, they weren't that big, those bands. You know, they were cult level, weren't they? And we liked them, but they weren't in the top 10 chain. You know, not their fault, but they weren't in the top. I mean, Typical Girl should have been a top 10 hit. And made a massive change. We didn't, but then also people always forget Susie Quattro, don't they? Yeah. Who had been amazing 4 or 5 years before for those three singles. I know she didn't write them, but the way she played them and the way she looked was amazing, wasn't it? You know, I feel it's slightly a shame that she gets written out there, because I think she's quite influential in all this. So, but and Susie as well, because you've never seen a woman like Susie who looks, you know, that terrifying actually. You know, that was amazing as well. So. Yeah, we were all brought up in a very conservative world where men had to be men and women were women, but we weren't real men, you know, we weren't tough, you know, we were, like I said before, we were just scared, nerdy kids, you know, we didn't want to be blokes, you know, like normal blokes. We didn't want to play rugby and bully people. That wasn't what we were interested in for our lives, and all my mates were like that as well. It was a lot of pressure on blokes to be blokes, and maybe the ultimate rebellion that came out of punk was that you could actually find a space to not be a normal bloke. Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of us like that. It wasn't just a personal thing, and that, and the women were accepted as being equals in our world as well. Not you know, somebody you just had a fumble with in a car and kicked him out of the car, which like all the other blokes did. You know, we just want to be mates with women and stuff like that. Yeah, I hate all that rock and roll shit. You know. Yeah, they seem rubbish. Then now you look back at it, you know, all that 70s sort of grossness. Some of the best bands ever are horrible people, and the way they were treating like women or other people in the 70s, in the 60s, it's all coming out nowadays, isn't it? All the, you know, the 14-year-old girl stuff and that. And punk generally was not like that, was it? It was the first time. It was like a step away from that world, the Jimmy Savile world of showbiz, isn't it?
You're mentioning Jimmy quite a lot.
Oh yeah, because he does sum up the 70s, doesn't he? Yeah.
It's a fair
the awfulness of him. He was the worst.
Are you going to show me a tattoo?
There's a lot of other people who weren't that far away from him, you know. Yeah.
And he came to Ireland frequently, and there was a very, very famous moment where he led a charity walk of children collecting money for a charity, and he got on stage, and I kid you not, a priest called Father Michael Cleary, for any of the people, a priest sang the Chattanooga Choo Choo Boy, while Jimmy Savile stripped down to his underpants in front of 6,000 Irish school children raising money for charity.
Wow.
So that's
That's the 70s for you.
yeah. But I think you're both making a really, really important point about that our experience of that punk moment was everyone's equal. Everyone's got a point of view, you know, that life is complex, and it kind of exposed me to things that I hadn't thought about, or I didn't have fully developed ideas. But it's notable, where were the women in Northern Irish punk early on? In Dublin, there was an all-female punk band called the Boy Scouts, SCOUTZ, who were kind of helped by Steve Averill from the Radiators from Space, who did the first fanzine, the first punk fanzine, and he put an ad saying, women wanted for punk band. They wrote in and he said, okay, go and do whatever. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. I just think you should find each other. You know, so he wasn't a Svengali, he wasn't a Kim Fowley. So we had these really positive
Kim
role
Fowley,
models.
he was a creepy guy, wasn't he? Yeah.
In an industry full of
I
creepy
met him,
guys.
he was horrible. You know, people actually make your skin crawl when you meet them.
Yeah.
But what's more important here was, we're not saying punk was an ideal period. It's actually a lot better now. It's getting there. We're not there yet. There's way more women in bands now, and really great bands and really key bands. Yeah. You know, like we can't talk about the present by talking about the past. You know, it's punk was flawed, really flawed. It was a lot of blokes, and now, you know, when people do things about punk, there's a lot of blokes like this talk about something 40 years ago. But it's because it was 40, 50 years ago. It was a different place. It wasn't. Even then we thought this isn't right. But now it's a lot better, isn't it? Yeah. So this conversation in 50 years' time, it'll be three women. It'll be different. It'll be different. It'll be much better because of that, won't it? You know. So when you go to put, even like Rebellion, we talked about that before. You know, and it's they really put a lot of young 15, 16, 17-year-old girls in punk bands onto those stages in there to try and make it change, and it's changing from the bottom up. That's because things only ever change from grassroots up. You can't change from the top down.
Yeah, and to me that's been one of the most positive things about going to Rebellion every year, is the amounts of transgender performers who are ferocious and talented female performers. So in 50 years' time, you know, thankfully we won't get a look in on these kind of conversations, because it'll be a different world. This has been such a joy getting to talk to the three of you, but Neil's had a long day because it's record shop day, but I'll totally invite questions. You must have better questions than I do. Does anyone want to ask, including Kevin? Actually, Kevin, you come up here, and does anyone have any questions for our global panel?
Global. All the way from Galway.
I'm taking the drunk bus back tonight too.
So it's always that weird bit with some that's fast. Somebody actually is going to ask a question within 10 seconds.
Hi, John. I was just interested in what you were saying. You know that idea about bad people making good music? Because I met Chris Martin once, and I felt really bad because he was so lovely.
Yeah.
But his music is so shit. And then I realized, all right, he's separate from the music.
Yeah.
Different. So I can like music of people like Morrissey. I love Morrissey, but in his day, Morrissey was on the side of the outsider and the person who fucking. So I'm interested in Boff's comment that sort of now he can't listen to Morrissey. Because the music, isn't it separate from the person who made it? It's owned by the people who listen to it. No?
I don't think it is, but I totally understand that it can be. Because it's funny, because I listen to a lot of, you know, instrumental music, and that means you get away with it, because you don't have to even think about what they
So what about, you could go through your record collection, probably chuck away most of the records.
Well, no, it's
from
not
the stories I could tell.
No, it's not just. It's not just about like whether people are good people or nice people or whatever. It's like that. It's music gets used for loads. So, for instance, one of the early albums I got was Rolling Stones' Aftermath album, which I used to love, and I find it really. I can't listen to Under My Thumb now. It's so hateful and spiteful and misogynist, you know. And Bob Dylan singing "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right." they're awful. They're basically saying, women, you were my woman, but you're a piece of shit under my foot. And even though the songs are great, I can't listen to them.
How do you feel about Brown Sugar?
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
it's horrible.
problematic. Really problematic. Yeah, and it is such a good song, but it's like, whoa, hang on. Then once you find out what it's about, it's like, this is fucking outrageous. Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss, right? When you don't know
Yeah.
some of the things about
Yeah.
your, when you start interviewing musicians and you find out they're assholes or they're, pedophiles or sexist or whatever, right? So,
Yeah, I think
Have you
it's
sometimes I don't want to know.
Have you interviewed someone who's, I'm not saying you've got to say it, but you've actually completely changed your opinion on them because they're so awful to you?
Well, some people are. I mean, the Fall, he was difficult, wasn't he? But they made great records. But
Yeah.
there's some stuff he would say off the cuff would not be too far away from Morrissey as well, you know. So
Oh, towards the end, he
where
was
do you sit
talking
John
dry.
Peel? It's
Yeah.
it's endless, isn't it? It's just, I think you have to be prepared to be disappointed by
Yeah.
people. But I find the records they always say that thing anyway. Not talk about people in this specific thing, but once you release a record, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to whoever buys the record, isn't it? And what they think of the record, the way they interpret it, what that makes them feel is important. That's their part of the contract, isn't it? I mean, with someone like Morrissey, you could just say, I would say to his face if I go and find him, what the fuck happened to you? Why are you being so ridiculous? And why don't you just? I actually feel sorry for him. He's got all this money, he's got all this adulation, and he's a miserable twat. Isn't he? Why don't you just loosen up and enjoy your life when you've got your last 10 years or something like that? But instead of but it's so.
I think you take that really well.
I tell him. But I think, a lot of people are contrarians and they become so contrarian they get stuck up a cul-de-sac and they can't come out again, can they? He can't just say, oh God, I'm sorry. If he just said, I'm sorry for all that crap I said the last 10 years, everyone would go, hooray, he's back. So, but I do separate the music, but I still call the people out for stuff I don't agree. But I'm not saying I'm absolutely right. I'm not saying, I have a perfect vision of the world. If you don't match my perfect vision of the world, I can't listen to your music. I mean, you're a massive Beatles fan, aren't you? And that could be difficult with John Lennon as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes the fucked upness and the ridiculousness of these people's states of mind actually does help them create great art, doesn't it?
Well,
Unfortunately.
when my daughter was born, which was
So-
quite a long time ago, we were her middle name was going to be John Paul George Ringo. But then it was the time and then Paul McCartney played for the Queen's Silver Jubilee or whatever it was, and I just thought, hang on, you can't tell what people are going to do. Don't.
In the context of rock stars doing horrible shit, that's not very.
bad enough.
Can I just ask a question? Just Kevin, you have written about and you've looked into the Belfast punk scene, and John, you and Boff both. I think the first time you played in Dublin was to like at DIY gigs and people putting on independent gigs. Was that Belfast punk scene where people were doing their own things? Do you think that was important, or are we just kind of fooling ourselves into thinking that it is?
I think it was very important, right? And it was DIY because it had to be, right? Because as you know, Belfast very provincial, right? England and London are miles and miles away. No one's coming, no bands are coming there. So it had to be DIY. And because of that, and again, we can think of that, it's not a huge scene. There's several dozen people who are committed, who are making this really important scene. But the ethos of DIY, I think, is part of what's in the soil of the Belfast punk that comes out, right? And I think when we're thinking about the consequential nature of scenes, that DIY aspect of what's in Belfast, I think, is one of the most defining aspects of the scene, and it continued into the 80s and 90s. I mean, the Warzone Collective walked the walk and talked the talk.
I think every cliche the music press would write about, like the Clash or the original punk bands being kids on the street and all that stuff. Belfast actually was, that's what makes Belfast unique. It was not There's no major labels there. There's no music business there really. There's no like Svengali there. Terry Hulu's the closest you got, and Terry, for all the brilliance of him, is not a Svengali at all.
No, not at all.
He creates a place. You know what those guys do? Those people do. They create the playground for everyone to play in, don't they? And that's all they do. And it was a real deal in a sense. It was all the cliches of what people thought punk was or soul punk was. Belfast actually was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And there's one, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, but I just want to highlight it, which is a really weird thing about Belfast, because so many scenes, especially in the States, are going to be undercut by drugs, right? By the 70s, 80s, they're going to have drugs. One of the interesting things about the Belfast is the paramilitaries at that time kept all the drugs out, right? So from the 70s into the 80s, right, it'll change, right? But they're keeping the drugs out, which I think is amazing, because in other scenes, you're going to have this corrosive influence of heroin taking lives, and that's not happening in Belfast, which I think is a really interesting and very odd quirk.
I think it's like not just Belfast as well, because I'm thinking some of the best gigs that we ever played were in before the Berlin Wall came down, like going into places like Poland, like playing in this tiny town called Zgorzelec, where it's just all word of mouth, and you get there and there's like 250 people there crammed into a space, or playing in East Germany where there's people from the Stasi there. These are places where it really matters that you've made the effort to get there, and consequently, if you like when you're on stage, I'm used to playing gigs. I've played millions and millions of gigs, but you're on stage and you realise what it means to people. It's really emotional. You think, oh, this matters. This song I'm singing actually matters, and it reminds you why did we write this song in the first place, and that's really important. It's brilliant.
But you know what matters even more is it's a space for people to get in a room together. So you should never fool yourself that I'm not saying you do, but if you're in a band that you're the conduit, but you're not the reason. You know what I mean? Everyone's there because it's an excuse to be together to celebrate something apart from the monochromatic of real life, isn't it? Yeah, and you're lucky you get that chance to do that, isn't it? That's what I found out when I played Iron Curtain gigs as well.
Brilliant. Thanks a million for coming
You
back.
got to sing?
Riot. Now, speaking of communal experiences, the last time I ran around after a man in a circle shouting "Riot, Riot" was at a Gold Plate gig in
You're not getting your money back.
Yeah. This has been a fascinating, there's so many strands that are coming out of this conversation, and we will continue in our conversations to pull out. Just in terms of that conversation about people and the art they make and separating them. But we used to have a phrase in the music industry, I shouldn't tell you, but it was GGBB. And you'd see someone and you'd just say to your friends, GGBB. And it meant good guy, bad band. So, so someone you'd meet on tour who was really friendly, really nice, maybe even liked your band, or, was really, really cool, but don't listen to their music, because you like them a little less.
Yeah. That's a very subtle way of saying it.
Sorry, you have to find out at the end. And then my last thought, coming down on the bus, was about the first time that I came in contact with. I didn't actually meet them, but with John and Boff was through the Trinity Ball, which used to be very, very DIY. It was run by students, it was run by amateurs, it was run by people who were just there for a year, and they were phenomenally well organised and interesting and kind of showed. But you mentioned Jeff Buckley in your book about people who died and early, but you probably don't know that Jeff Buckley's first gig in Europe was with Chumbawamba at the Trinity Ball.
Really?
It was the first time he had played outside of New York, and it was the year that Niall had brought you over.
Yeah.
And then the other Trinity Ball story is Niall told me that John Robb was coming over and it would be great if he could get into the Trinity Ball. Now, everyone wants to go to the Trinity Ball. So in my naivety, I went to the people who organised the Trinity Ball and said, oh my God, there's a guy from Sounds and he's in magazine, in town, and if we can get him in, he'll write about it and it'll be great. Everyone will know about the Trinity Ball. And I said, everyone knows about it already. What is this Soundings magazine? Why would, and I thought, okay. But I was working on the door of the Trinity Ball, and I thought, I ran a very, very tight ship. No one got in. There was a guy who stood at the gate for 4 hours saying, can I get in now? And I was in school with him. Like I hadn't seen him since school. I was there. His name's Stephen. Some of you might be his children. And can I get in now? And it's 2:00. I said, you're not getting in. Go away. And half an hour later, can I get in now? I said, no. He could be still there, like I always. But Niall said, said you're over. I thought, that'd be so great, because it was the year Public Enemy were playing their first gig in Europe. I thought it'd be great if John Robb could see that. So I said, Niall, here's what you do. Just the two of you come to the gate, walk through very, very quickly, and just kind of nod at me and make it look like you're putting your tickets in the box. And they did that. And I let them in. Okay, I have the tickets, and they went in. Thought, great, they're in. They'll have a good night. And about an hour later, I see Niall sauntering back to the gate. How's it going, Michael? It's going great, Niall, except you're meant to be inside. And I think you'd met a band. Was it That Petrol Emotion? Yeah. And you decided, I can come in and out of the Trinity Ball anytime I want. So in all the years I was at Trinity doing security for Trinity Ball, only 4 people got in. You're one, another lad from England is one, and Niall is 2. And they were on the same night, 60 minutes after each other. So
it was a great gig.
Yeah, it was a stellar gig. It was absolutely incredible. And so was this night. You were lovely people to be talking to other lovely people in front of. So thank you so much, and thanks to Neil for organising this.
Yeah, if anybody wants to buy a book, we'll be hovering hopefully around the table.
Yeah, so hopeful hovering over here, and there's books and fanzines galore.